Hello, this is Kathy Graham with ERP VAR. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to get started in a minute. And today we have Chris Elmore with Avid Exchange presenting the top 4 reasons Sage 100 users must automate accounts payable in 2014. So before we get started, a few housekeeping items. As attendees, you have the option to ask questions in the panel to the right. You can raise your hand and use the chat feature, and we will address those questions at the end of the presentation, so please hang in there. This is about 45 minutes long. And with that, I'm going to get started here and let Chris go ahead. Chris Elmore, thank you so much for joining us.
Great, thanks, Kathy. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to this group. We got a good-sized group that's just taken some time to talk about the 4 reasons why Sage 100 users have to automate this year. And so here's the thing. Let me do this first. Let me just kind of introduce myself to give you folks an idea of where all this is coming from. And I've been helping folks since 2000 get rid of the paper in their accounting processes. And I've helped organizations, and one of the things that one of the myths that we are going to kind of bust today is that automation is one of those things that's most useful and almost exclusively for larger companies, that have, huge spread out operations. And the real kind of bottom line of it is I plan to make a case today that we can all benefit from getting rid of the paper. And so to give you an idea about that, and then that's my picture there. I dressed up for that picture. And I've written a couple of books on the topic, which means I'm a lot of fun at parties. And the long and short of it is that I've helped organizations that have as many as 1.5 million invoices a month, which is just a huge number, ranging all the way down to about 75 invoices a month. And the reason why I bring that up is, like I said, I want to make a case that everyone in between and in both points at the start and finish had benefits. Now, they're different benefits. An organization that has 1.5 million is a lot different, as far as what the impact is as an organization that has 75 invoices. But what I found just through experience is that even though a large organization can free up tens of thousands of hours, the smaller organization can free up hundreds of hours, but it seems to have the same general impact to the business. So that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. Okay, Haley, I hope you're ready. Haley's my helper here. She always does a great job with launching some polls and asking some questions. I'm curious to know from the people that are gathered here today. Now, all you have to do, Haley's going to launch this poll, and what will happen is you'll get some buttons on your. You can see that on your screen here. So I'm going to ask you 2 questions back to back, just so I can kind of get to know the audience. The first question is, what percentage of invoices are you getting electronic? And just kind of fill in whatever makes sense there and click the submit button. And Haley will watch that and close it, and then we'll go to the next one, Haley, whenever you're ready or when everyone has kind of answered it. But what we're looking for is, with the percentage of electronic invoices, generally the question is, are you getting any invoices that are being emailed in? Are you getting any, invoices that are kind of on maybe a spreadsheet or some kind of EDI? Are you getting any invoices that are coming other than paper is really what I'm looking for. So once that's finished, if you can just close that, great. And then the second question, and it seems somewhat redundant, but the second question is, what percentage of payments are you doing electronic? Now, again, along the same lines, the idea here would be that the payments that you'd be doing are probably more like ACH, but there could be some, wires or transfers or things like that. And some of you maybe even have gotten into this idea of putting payments onto credit card, merchant accounts, ghost cards, things like that. So tell me just want to get to know who's on the line a little bit. And Haley, when you're all done with that, if you could just, thank you so much. You did a great job. After this is over, I hope you get to take the day off. So here we go. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And today we've got 4 reasons why you should automate. I'm just going to read it as if you couldn't read it yourself, but no more missing invoices, no more late fees. You reduce the processing time on an average of 28 days to 3, or whatever, how many days that you process, and you decrease processing costs. So those are the 4 things. Now here's the thing. Traditionally in a webinar, what we do is we'd say, okay, let's talk about missing invoices, and then we talk about that. Let's go into late fees, and then we're going to talk about that. I'm not going to do that. I wanted to take a different angle because I felt like, well, first of all, I don't know if I necessarily follow the norms of all the webinars, because I want to give you something that hopefully you can kind of get a 1, 2, possibly even 3 takeaways that you can say, all right, here's some tangible information that I can use in my decision-making process. There's a couple of things I know about you folks that are on the phone, especially with a group that's this size, is that I know that there's a certain amount of you that are just 100% curious about what this whole thing is. What is this paperless automated AP thing? How in the world, why are people talking about it? So, I appreciate that group. I like to talk to that group. Most of the books that I write and the blogs that I write are dedicated to that group. Why in the world should I even listen to this? So I appreciate you joining. And then I know that there's other people in the group that are people who are saying, okay, we're going to do this, right? We are going to do this. I just want to make sure that I'm doing it for the right reasons. And obviously we're going to speak to both of these groups. Then there's a third, but usually a much smaller group that has already gotten rid of the paper or already attempted to automate, and they just have a gut that things could be better and things could improve. So even though these are my 4 points and these are my 4 reasons, and at the end of the webinar I'm going to come back to these reasons to make sure that I covered them, I'm going to take you through I'm going to take you through the software from start to finish so you can pick up on maybe some other ideas that we didn't think about. So I'm going to prove the 4, but most importantly, I'm going to take the mystery out of exactly what automation is by going into the AvidXchange product. Now, before I do, there's one thing that I have to cover, and that is that and if you're in that front group, that first group that says, well, what is all of this about? This screen and the next screen may be the most helpful for you. And that is, what I'm about ready to do is give you a definition of accounts payable automation. And I'm going to do it in picture form, because years ago I used to do this where I was explaining it, and I'd wave my hands here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where the sun is shining, and I'd try to make a case about why you should automate and it never really seemed to make the impact that these 2 screens that I'm about ready to show you. And the reason why is with 2 slides, I'm going to be able to define exactly what AP automation is to the point where you're going to be able to understand it easily. It's not that complex. Now, how it works and underneath, it's very complex, but the idea and the impact on the top is not that complex, and I want to give that to you. But I also, as you hear this definition, I also want you to keep in mind that it's very possible that when you get off this webinar and go talk to your colleagues or your people in the business, and you say you drop this little nugget, hey, I'm thinking that we should automate, the first thing they're going to say is, what is accounts payable automation? I want to give you an answer to that. That's really what I want to do, is I want to give you a definition that you can say, okay, I got it, but then you can turn around and then reproduce it. These screens do that. So what you're looking at here is a typical accounts payable process where the invoice comes in, it's open, it's routed around, entered into the accounting system, selected, paid, and filed. Not breaking any huge ground here. That's a very typical process. Now, the definition is this. As I switch the screen, what you're going to see is everything that's slashed out is taken over by automation. So the technical definition of accounts payable automation is it's only as good as the people, time, and effort that it frees up. So here's the thing, and using this definition, I can say, well, automation is only as good as the time that it frees up. If I went back to that last screen, all of those circles represent people doing stuff within your organization. The whole point of automation is to free up as many people from manual tasks as possible, so you can use that human capital. I don't even know if that's a good word, but you can use those people. And by the way, that might be you who's going to be freed up primarily. you might be freed up primarily, and then that could unnerve you a little bit. But the thing about it is, there's probably other things that you have that you'd like to do with your time, or there's other things that you would like for your people that work with you to do with their time, other than, say, opening the mail or doing data entry into the accounting system or stuffing checks into envelopes and filing and going to files. So, and by the way, the last thing I'll mention about this is the purpose and point of automation is to free up as many manual tasks that aren't as significant as other tasks. So you can see I didn't slash out the circles of coding and approving because I wanted to make the point that those are things that you don't want to automate. Those are business decisions. So hopefully I've made a case for the fact that automation is only as good as the time that it frees up. And I've given you an idea of why should you automate, and that is our people could be used better somewhere else instead of doing tasks. Now, before we get into the software, I wanted to make a point about this. And at the end of this webinar, I'm going to give you the ability to where you can find your own number. So if automation is only as good as the people, time, and effort that it frees up, the question is, well, how many people, how much time, and what's the effort? So, and by the way, I'm going to give you some generic numbers, but the only reason I'm giving you generic numbers is so you can just have a sense of it all. And what I found out is that every company's numbers are completely different. So at the end of the webinar, I'm going to give you the ability, if you so choose, to find out what your number is so you can really get an understanding of the impact of automation. So I'm back here to my screen here because I wanted to make a point that in finding your cost per process, how much does it cost you to process an invoice? And finding this, the response is, well, first of all, you got to know where everything is. It comes in, it goes to this person, it goes to that person, this person does that. So you basically create a map. And then when you've created a map, now I'm going to use just a small subsection of the map. When you create a map, all you have to do is attach the people who do the work, the time, and that it takes them to do that task. So now you have an amount of time that's on that task, and then you apply their salary to that task. So what you've done is, let me back up here to make the point. What you've done is through all of the little circles within this process, you find out how much time it's costing you, and if you apply a salary, you can put a dollar amount to that. Now, again, just to kind of fast forward here, let me give you some numbers. An organization that has about 1,000 invoices a month, they can expect to free up about 4,000 hours annually. Now that's a lot of hours. The return on investment is about $45,000 a year, which is an important benchmark. But I think it's important for you to know that even though you get a return on investment, no one technically writes you a $45,000 check because you generally are taking people from one task to another task. Now, I don't want to undersell the value of that, because what you're doing is you're taking a skilled person from an unskilled task and moving them to a very skilled task, which has a greater impact. But here's the thing, and this is the thing that I really wanted to point out to people, and then I'm going to make a point about this, and that is those 4,000 hours are generally spread out across about 12 people. So if it was just straight 4,000 hours, that means that you would have 2 people that you could do something with. But really what happens is you have 12 people where 5% or 8% or 30% or even 50% of their time is being freed up, but generally whole people aren't being freed up. So let me make the point here before I go into the next part, which is what all this looks like. And the point is this, that those organizations, in my experience, that have successfully automated, and compare those organizations to others that have looked at automation and said, this doesn't make sense. The tipping point between those two groups that says, not right now, versus, yeah, I'm automated, the tipping point between those two groups are this middle number here, the 4,000. And the big question to that is, as an organization, do I have the need for 4,000 additional hours? Now, by the way, remember at the end of this webinar, I'm going to give you the ability to find out what your number is. Maybe your number is 3,000, maybe it's 1,000. Heck, I've seen it as, I can't believe I said heck. I've seen it as high as 8,500. I've seen it into the tens of thousands, with larger organizations. But the point is, everyone's number is just a little bit unique. Not everybody can process at the same speed. Not everyone is staffed at the same levels. So the long and short of it is there is a uniqueness in this number. But here's, like I said, again, just talking high level, the difference between the companies that do and the companies that don't automate is that they have a really good reason for these 4,000 hours. So that's kind of making a little bit of a case here. Now, the long and short of it is, once we've tallied up all this information and do a little math, we can find out how much your entire process is costing you. And then you can use that as a benchmark to gauge if you're going to be successful in automation. Let me give you a number around that. The average organization, it costs them about $22 to process an invoice all the way through payment and filed. $22. Now, generally when I give this information, especially to live audiences, and I usually poll them, I ask them, okay, what do you think? What's the number? People will say $5. I even have one person say $250. I don't know what they were thinking, but I've never seen it that high. But you get the point that it's not a number that most people know. So as I give you the average, you usually cost about $22 for every invoice that becomes a check within your organization. That automation's job, and this, by the way, is just AvidXchange numbers, is to take that 22 down to about 8. And the difference between that's your return on investment. That's where I got that number from earlier. So, and like I said, no one's going to be writing anybody a $45,000 check, but what happens is at the beginning of the process, if you find out that you're 22, and at the end of the process you find out that you're 8, you can say, well, we've been successful. That's another thing that people are challenged with, and I'm talking, as I opened up today, I'm talking to the group that's kind of in the third bucket. I've been through it, but I don't know if I'm successful or not. I've got this gnawing feeling that I didn't achieve what I needed to achieve. So basically, the case is to be made. Do you need 4,000 hours? And then, to ensure your success, you're starting at 22 and you're ending at 8. That's a good, solid benchmark to know that you've actually arrived and you've been successful with your automation program. Now, on the flip side of that, I'm probably pointing out the obvious here, but I'm kind of known for that. On the flip side of that is, let's say you started at 22 and when you ended your project, you're at 12. Well, you got some work to do. And usually what happens with that is that the client always says, well, how did you mess up here, talking to the service provider. But my experience has been it's usually a combination of both of those things. And so if you get to 12 knowing that you need to be at 8, you got some work to do. Again, the whole point is it's kind of clear. Okay. Let's get into the offering. Now, as I transition, I want to encourage you, if you have any questions about anything that I just talked about, the definition, kind of making a case using some numbers, and then understanding if you're successful by reducing your processing costs, put those in the question block. I got Haley monitoring that. She's a very nice person, and she's going to give me the high sign once we have any questions to kind of go through. So just put those in the comment section, and I'll answer the questions. Now, I want to move on and talk about and give you an idea of what all of this means. What does all of this look like? And so we're physically going to go into the live software. And I'm going to show you the invoicing piece, and I'm going to show you the pay piece. I'm going to do it really high level. And almost to the point where I'm apologizing for doing it at such a high level. But I did want to mention that if anyone in this group wants to take a deeper dive and really get into the software, and by the way, like I said, no two companies are exactly alike when it comes to processing accounts payable and payments. So it may make sense to get more of a customized demonstration where you can ask questions or where we can understand, where you're coming from, so we can make it a more of a, I'm going to use the word I use, more of a kind of a customized situation, so you can get your answers. So generically, I'm going to go in here and just kind of show you around. The first thing that I want to mention is how do invoices get into the system. Now, one of the things that we do at AvidXchange that's somewhat controversial is that we have the ability to get 100% of your invoices in electronic form. And the reason why that's somewhat controversial is because most people don't believe that it's possible, but it is. And here's how it's possible. And the reason why it's possible is because the first thing is that we have a processing center that you're able, we have 3 actually, that you're able to send your invoices to. We'll open the mail and scan it for you. That's how we're able to back up the idea that all the invoices are electronic, because the paper is being sent to us and we're dealing with it on your behalf. But you can scan it yourself. So we can scan, you can scan, we can get electronic EDI documents from vendors. We also have a portal where you can upload invoices, and then we have email. Now, I end on email because I wanted to make the point that we get more emails than anything. Vendors like it. Vendors love it, by the way, because they don't have to pay postage, and they also get a confirmation that the email's into the system. But if they can't send email and they can do paper, we'll have a way of dealing with that too. There's 2 things I want you to think about. One is the more you make the more you burden the vendor to change, and even if you charge the vendor, the more that you kind of burden the vendor, those 2 things, the more that you burden the vendor, the longer your implementation process is, and the more you're going to have to manage it. So we set up a system to where the vendor can send in any type of invoice that they want, and we're not going to charge them to do anything, so that makes it real easy on you guys. So let me do this. I'm going to get into the live software, and let's open this right up here, and I'll activate my screen. The first thing to kind of understand about our AvidXchange offering is we do operate as what's called software as a service, or in the cloud, or net-based, or web-based. There's multiple names for it, but there's nothing you have to buy or install at your location, and there's nothing you have to maintain. And so when I put my login, hopefully you can see that, when I put my login in there, it gives me all the invoices that need my attention. So, and this also has an email address that's attached to this. So when I go into the invoice, and by the way, there's 2 primary questions that people ask when they first start looking at accounts payable automation. The first question is, what do you do with the invoices? Now, they don't really care what we do with the invoice. Well, some people might care, but what they're really asking is, am I going to be able to see what I'm used to seeing? And the answer is absolutely. So whatever the vendor sends to us, in whatever form the vendor sends it to us, we put it in this PDF file. And if it's back and front 30 pages, you'll see all 60 pages. You know, you're going to get everything. That's an important thing to know, that you're not going to take steps back in the amount of information that they're used to seeing. And then the second question that we normally get is, and sometimes it's posed more in the kind of in more of a question about how we operate, and that is, well, how will AvidXchange know how to code the invoice? And the answer is, well, AvidXchange is not going to know. Remember, that's a business decision. That's something that your folks are going to have to do. We consider that a business decision. We just wouldn't have we have over 500 clients, and so we really wouldn't have the expertise to code invoices. You know, and so the point is, whatever coding structure or detail that you have that resides in your Sage system, Sage 100 system, we're going to put right here, all of it. So you'd have the ability to come in here and split this by percentage or dollar amount, and you can even put in look up from a list, or you can type in a keyword, and you can pull it from that keyword, and then you can simply populate the coding of the invoice right there. So the whole point is we're not going to reinvent the wheel. Now, we have some defaults. We have some things that will save this information. Again, if you have a question or a comment about this, put that in the question section. Usually I get 1 or 2 questions about the coding piece of it. So you can split it. You can see the invoice. Now, just a little bit about the benefit. And the benefit is this. Now, this is going to talk directly to a couple of our points that we made. Of one of the 4 reasons. And the benefit to automation is, the first thing, when an invoice gets put into an approval process, now you can have as many approval processes as you want. That's important to know. They are customized for you because, again, not every company does their approval process exactly the same. The first thing that happens is that an individual, You can see down here on this line of under responsibility, an individual, a person within your organization is made personally responsible for every step of the approval process. So from a kind of a tracking and a perspective, you're always going to know where the invoice is, whose work is done, and whose work needs to be done. The second thing is from the moment that the invoice is received, the software starts tracking it. It tells you how long people have held on to things, who's holding on to what, where is it, in what. So I changed the code. There's the old code, the new code, the person who made the change, and the date and time that it happened. So not only are you going to always know what's going on, where it is, and who's responsible, you're going to know exactly what they've done, what changes have been made to it instantly. And then lastly, there's a comment section. And this comment section gives you the ability to type in anything along with an email address, and that comment will be applied to the history section. So I'm going to pause here just a minute, for just a minute, and make the point about this entire section, is that from one invoice, detail, you're going to be able to see exactly who's doing what, when, why, for what reason, and what kind of comments are against that. So there's a lot of things, and again, I'm going high level on this. There's a lot of things that this section does, but in a very basic way, what this allows you to do is this allows you to, well, quite frankly, you start managing and understanding your expenses from the moment that it's received from the vendor. And sometimes that can give you some visibility to what's going on with your cash, maybe even 1 to 2 weeks sooner than you normally would. So it benefits cash management, knowing what's out there. And then the second thing, and this is directly one of our points, is it does speed up the approval process. Having everything online, visible, used through a mobile device, wherever you are, anytime, the proverbial 24/7. That whole thing greatly impacts the approval process, and that's how we're able to get the approval process down to 3 days. But here's the last thing, and I leave the last thing for, it's a pretty big benefit. And it's a big benefit for many reasons, but I think just for your sanity, here we go, just for your sanity as a professional, it seems to have a lot of benefits. And that is, there's no more back and forth about what's going on with this invoice, who's got it, where is it, I filed it, I faxed it, I emailed it, I put it on your desk, where's the file, who's got the file, someone took the file home, I guess it's misfiled, we need to go through. So all of that, what I call he said, she said, stops. Now, once that kind of stuff stops within your organization, I do believe that that's a better day for you. And even though that's kind of a, potentially could be a nice to have, remember all these things are kind of stacking up as benefits. There's the ability to use people's time better. There's the ability to change your organization and streamline it, to speed it up. There's the ability, to not have to have these conversations and babysit people. I hate to put it that way, but those are a couple of the great benefits from a tool like AvidXchange, is that everything is here. It's a permanent record, and it can't be changed. That's why I always say, and if you don't remember anything from my webinar, remember this: when you're automated, don't talk about other employees or curse in the comment section, because it's going to be there forever unless you really want to curse. Okay, so when I approve this invoice, you notice that the invoice has been successfully approved. And then eventually, and I'm going to log out. I apologize for the log in and log out, but I'm going to log out as someone who's more like an administrator. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to show you, here's the invoice that we just approved. It's sitting on this person's desk. Everything works into real time, and that's great for you people that have spread out operations. So if you have a branch office or multiple offices, or if you have a sister facility somewhere, across the state or something, once you push that button, the next person has it. Everything works in real time. And here's what it's saying: it's been successfully approved, and then it's been batched. Now I bring up that point of batching because I want to make this point, and that is that when everything is completely batched, there's 607 invoices in here. This might not be the best example for everyone, because usually these batches are transported once or twice a day. So there's 607 invoices that have been fully approved but not yet sent over. And what I just did is I took all 607 and I sent it out of my system, the Avid Exchange system, and then it's being imported into the Sage 100 system. Now, the big thing that we eliminate there, and the big value there, is that there's no more need to data enter any information. So you don't have to physically type it payables into your accounting system. That's the big benefit. But from a security standpoint, because if you think, well, if I'm transferring 600 invoices, what's going to stop it from transferring wrong information or putting expenses into periods that are closed, or batching over an invalid ID or an invalid a code, or a code that doesn't agree with the entity or whatever? And the answer is, when it's imported into the Sage 100 system, it checks every single record. Not only does it check every single record, it checks every single bit of data in every single record, which means that all of your permissions and all of your processes and all of your securities are applied to that import-export process. So when it's imported, basically your Sage 100 system says, yeah, this is good, it's clean, it makes sense. There's no errors. Now, if there are errors, what it does is it tells you which invoices are wrong, so it gets very specific, and then it says what the error is. So you can kind of know exactly what's going on with that, so you can fix it. And that's the whole point. Now, let me do one thing. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint, and I need to get settled on a screen up here and kind of make a point. I won't put it in presentation mode because I'm going to continue with the live software. But I wanted to give you this glimpse before I moved on, and that is, so far up to this point, we've talked about getting invoices in electronic form, putting it into an approval process. You guys code and approve, and at the end of that process, it's transferred out of Avid Exchange and into your accounting system. Now, our goal is to put an AP transaction into your accounts payable module of Sage 100. Now, once it's in there, whatever process you go through of selecting, identifying, check runs, check series, check numbers, bank accounts, cash management, all of that stays exactly the same. Exactly. The only difference is, as an option, you have the ability, instead of sending all of your payments that you want to have made to your printer and it prints it out, you can send a file, which is what I'm doing right here. So here I go. I'm sending a file of the payments that I want to have made back to Avid Exchange. Now, keep in mind that this is after everything's been scheduled, qualified, the bank accounts are good, the check numbers have been assigned, and then you say, instead of print, you say send to Avid Exchange. Now, in my demonstration here, I just sent 12 payments. And the system has received the 12 payments. It organizes by your bank account, which is important for you to know. And then it uses your check number. Your bank account, your check number means that reconciliation stays exactly the same. And then here's what we do. And I almost make it sound like here's all we do, but it's actually pretty convenient and it's somewhat powerful. And the convenience is this, that we will go vendor by vendor and determine that the vendor on your behalf needs to be paid electronically or by way of a paper check. That's what we do. Now, the reason why that's powerful is because we maintain a very large database of vendors' electronic payment information. And in that database, if they're in that database to receive an electronic payment, then we execute accordingly. They say we want to be paid like this with this remittance information, to this person. It gives us all the details we need to pay it electronically. And when we do that, we execute electronically. Whatever's left over, and of course this is done in software speed. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Sometimes that happens. It's going to be a quick refresh, and I'll be right back. Here we go. Sorry about that. So when we determine who needs to be paid electronically, the rest of them are just left over as paper checks. So we print the paper check, put it in an envelope, and mail it out for you as a service. That's what we do. And by the way, there's even an approval process you can put on the back of this that'll show an approver all the invoice that makes up a certain payment, and then have the ability to select that. And now it goes out. But the point that I want to make here is that Our job is to determine if the vendor needs to be paid electronically or by way of a paper check. If the vendor has to change their banking information for whatever reason, which happens about 10% every year, or if there's an address change or anything like that, that's something that we take care of. That's part of the service. Now, I hope you're sitting down because there's another reason why this service exists, and I'm going to leave you with this and kind of conclude, and that is that some of these electronic payments are made to the vendor's credit card account, and if that happens, you get a rebate. Now, I'm going to leave it at that. If there's any questions, you can type it into your question section. I can handle it, but the point is that we try to drive a lot of these electronic payments to those credit card accounts so you can maximize your rebate. It's an interesting concept, but the point is that we control all of that, and as a benefit, as a security, you don't have to worry about any of it. Okay, so let me do this. I'm going to go back and finish up here, and I'm going to make sure that I come full circle with the 4 points, and to make sure that I just cover that again. Any questions? Just let me know. Just type it into that question section. And I appreciate the time and the attention. And I'm sorry that I'm filtering through my software or my presentation again because I want to get to this number. The last thing I want to leave you with is that our implementation process is between 30 and 45 days. We don't want to put you in a situation that if you decide to automate, that you're going to carry a project for the next 6 months. Nobody wants that. By the way, that's the number one objection besides using the time that people say that they just don't want to take a project on like this. They just don't have time for a project like this. So let me kind of conclude here. I appreciate everyone's time and attention. There's one last question that I'm going to ask you, and then I also want to make the offer of how you can find out what your number is, how much time can be freed up. But the 4 reasons to automate is no more missing invoices, late fees, reduce the processing time, and then the cost reduction, starting from the ground up. Our job, again, is to go from $22 to $8 per invoice. That definitely reduces the cost because what we're doing is we're taking people time and effort out of manual steps. We're technically replacing people's effort and time with software, and that's the classic definition of automation. And hopefully you can see by the way that we get these invoices into the system, put them into an approval process, and the approval process is convenient, that it takes only 3 days to process it. It's simple, it's easy, it's fast. And the last thing is no more missing invoices or late fees. We track all this stuff. We can even tell you if an invoice that's recurring should be in the software. But the point is, once it's sent to us and once we get electronic information, the invoice goes directly into the system. Usually missing invoices happen in transit, moving from one hand to the other. The more hands you have, the more chances you have of missing it. Same with late fees. The more kind of physical geography that you have to cover, the greater chance of having a late fee is. When we get rid of the paper and we get rid of it directly from the vendor, there's a much greater chance, obviously, it's fast and it goes right into the software, so those 2 things don't ever become a problem again. Let me ask you one more question. Haley, if you just go ahead and post this, and then I'm going to do our gift to them. If you could just kind of circle, what is it that you want to do next? You're just learning for now? Are you in that first group that just wants to kind of hear about it, or you'd like to know more? And liking to know more, our version of that is we just want to kind of extend the offer, and Haley, close that whenever you're ready. We just want to extend the offer that if you want a more customized demonstration, or if you want to pull in 1 or 2 of your colleagues into a more customized demonstration, we want to support you about that because we know this is something that people generally just don't sit down and say, hey, I'm going to do it. It's a process that you got to go through because what we do when we eliminate, people from manual tasks, what it does is it changes your organization. And like I said, one of the great things is that you don't have to one of the great things is that you free up a bunch of time, but one of the bad things is you got to kind of figure out how much time that is. So I see, Tony, you have a question there. Thank you for your question. How do we recruit vendors to participate? We don't do any recruiting. Hopefully, and again, if you want to bounce the question back a little bit, because maybe if I got the spirit of the question wrong, what we do is we very simply take the vendors that you are currently using. We inform them that they have the ability to email in invoices or send an invoice to an alternative lockbox. But the thing, Tony, just to kind of give you some insight, if we do our job right, which we do, the vendor doesn't know we exist. And that's an important thing for us because this is your process, it's your vendor, it's all you. So the important thing is we don't want to disrupt that relationship. What we want to do is get rid of the paper, we want to speed up the process, and we want to make the process more reportable. Any other questions, you let me know. And Tony, if I didn't answer that 100%, to your satisfaction, let me know, and I can kind of clarify that for you. Now, while we're kind of seeing if we're going to any more questions to queue up, the gift that I mentioned to you, and it's actually real simple. There's a lot more words on the screen that needs to be on there, but it's real simple. We have a spreadsheet that will ask you 15 questions, and if you're at all interested in receiving this spreadsheet, what that'll do is that will give you the opportunity to answer the question, and we can tell you what your number is. Now, the numbers that we come up with are going to be how much it costs you to process an invoice and a payment, so it can give you some kind of impact of what automation is going to be like. And then the last thing is it's going to give you the amount of time that automation can free up, so you can say. So you can basically say we're going to be freeing up 3,000 hours. What do we need to do with those 3,000 hours? Okay, so I got one more question. I just want to kind of clear it up with this. How do the vendors submit invoices? And so I had given you this funnel. I probably didn't spend enough time on it, but it's email, portal, EDI, electronic, or you can scan it, or it can be sent to our processing center, and we can scan it. So that's how vendors submit the invoices. All right, any other questions? Hopefully I've covered my 4 points. I'll put the 4 points up there to kind of to emphasize that. But if there's not any other questions, let me check the queue here, make sure yeah, it looks like we answered all the questions. I appreciate everybody's time. I appreciate everyone's attention, and hopefully you kind of got some 1 or 2 or 3 good takeaways from this. As a good next step for those of you that want to know more, we'd love to show you a deeper demonstration. But I think one of the big things is that you can take this assessment to find out what your numbers are going to be. So I appreciate your time and your attention. And you know, basically at this point, I don't know. Kathy, did you have anything that you wanted to say or conclude with? We didn't talk about that. I'm kind of putting you on the spot or anything. But that's all the material that I had. Okay. I appreciate everyone's time and attention for this webinar, the 4 reasons to automate. You know, no more missing invoices, late fees, reducing your processing time and increasing your cost. I did finish a little bit early because I wanted to give you 15 minutes back in your life there so you can do something with that. But thank you so much for your time and your attention. And again, my name is Chris Elmore, and I really much appreciate your time, and I hope everyone has a fantastic day. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. And I do appreciate your time today as well. This was quite informative. We had some good questions as well. Chris, would we be able to close with a question that I had?
Sure.
You mentioned you integrate with Sage 100 ERP, but I understand you also integrate with other ERP systems for those out there that may work with other systems. Can you cover that?
Good question. Yeah, good question. Yeah, how about that? Because I think in the beginning I said, well, I'm going to have to mention that we integrate with 46 different systems, Sage 100 being one of them. So thank you so much for asking that. You saved me. So it is 46, and really it runs the gamut from Dynamics we have a lot of real estate specific accounting systems, but we integrate with all of the Dynamics system, all of the Sages, and I like to call them all the former mass, numbers. And so, but we integrate with all the Sage soft accounting system, all the Dynamic systems, and then there's a lot of outliers. We even do things like QuickBooks, and we do things like J.D. Edwards and Oracle and SAP, and it just kind of runs the gamut. And there's some niche kind of boutique accounting systems like MRI and Yardi that service real estate, but most of our business are within the Sage world and within the Dynamics world. So we integrate with all of those. Great. Thank you for asking that.
Well, that's fantastic, and 46 is a big number, so I'm sure you have, like you say, the high end and the low end well covered. Thank you, Chris, and thank you all for your time and hanging in there. We will be sending the recorded version of this presentation, so for those of you who are interested, AvidXchange will send you an email with some follow-up items. And we'll go ahead and let you go get back to your busy day, and thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Bye, folks.